Good evening, everybody. I know we're tired, but good evening, everybody. Let's have a little bit of energy and excitement. My name is Matt Nelson. I am the National Chairperson for the National Society of Black Engineers. We're a 16,000 plus member organization across the world, actually, with the sole purpose of increasing the number of African American students entering engineering fields. But I'm also a PhD student here at the university studying design science, where my focus is on statistical modeling, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as well studying and incentivizing human behavior. I have an undergraduate degree in industrial and operations engineering from here with a focus on data analytics. And I also do some diversity consulting inside the university and outside the university as well. Part of my experience with the design science program is really merging engineering, education, psychology, and business. And so I have a range of experience in the automotive industry, but my last recent experience led me down this path of innovation. While working for Hyundai Kia, I was managing the innovation strategy and development for their North American R&D centers. And there I really got exposed to design thinking, so much so that I had a chance to do a joint project with IDEO, a multi-million-dollar joint project on a car of the future, as well as get certified in design thinker, so I'm certified to actually teach it as well. And I run a number of consumer research and design ethnography clinics to really understand what customers actually need. So here's the challenge. I was a college dropout, okay? I know there's a lot of educated people in this room, but I was one of those folks that fell through cracks. And I was out of school for 7 years before I came back. And that was a tough journey getting back. But one of the things I thought about as I reflected was I really didn't understand what it meant to be a successful college student. So when you look at this number, 4.8%, of the 600,000 plus engineering undergraduate students, only 4.8% are black. Only 36% of students of color graduate in 6 years from engineering. So there's more engineering dropouts in this country than engineers. I don't know if you thought about that. And then, of the students that actually take the ACT, only 6% of African American students meet college readiness benchmarks. So one of the things that we understand is that we have a preparation problem, and then we have a gap with understanding what it takes to actually be successful once you get into college. And that's what we found over time when we looked at the literature. This report came out in 2006 and actually listed some of the factors that universities across the country were using to combat these issues. Academic advising, early warning systems, learning communities, student success initiatives, and student support services. But this report came out in 2006. Has technology changed since then? Have our students changed since then? And so we're still giving anecdotal advice when it comes to advising based off of outdated information, and we don't have a method to figure out what students are actually doing today that correlates with academic success. This is one of the big gaps that we find. We also find that a lot of the research and education focuses on creating a model and validating it, not from the student perspective. And in addition, we don't really have enough information to evaluate some of these interventions and programs that we're putting into the market. So how do we know that it's actually working? So I went through some user discovery. We surveyed about 9,000 students and got about 30% response rate. And one of the key things that emerged was that they really don't know what it looks like to be a successful college student. This was one young lady here from South Carolina that talked about, I felt like I was being thrown into the wild and had to learn how to survive day by day. I just really didn't know what to take. Now, as she got ingrained into her community, she started to have these one-on-one conversations. Hey, you really need to think about going to office hours. You really need to think about study jams. But what if we could institutionalize that and provide a platform where students could actually get that information? That would be really powerful. And as we started to talk to universities, our corporate partners, as well as nonprofits, one of the things we found out is that there's huge need for longitudinal tracking of students and understanding what they're doing. Universities want to get smarter about the resources that they're providing to students. The companies really need to understand this talent pipeline. What does it look like over the next 4 to 5 to even 10 years? And then nonprofits obviously have a lot of students who are part of their organization. How well are they doing in servicing the students and their members? So I came across this notion of gainful pedagogy, which is really rooted in self-determination theory. That says, if I give a person the opportunity to make the meaningful choices in their life, if I create a community that gives them a sense of belonging, and then I also give them a challenging yet attainable task, then they will develop that own self-determination and that intrinsic motivation to become successful. They will seek out the resources that they need to find. And so there's really a couple core elements to this. Number one, giving people the freedom of choice. teaching them that they need to make the decision to fail or not, as well as giving them feedback and giving them transparency about what it means to be successful. So our product really looks at taking 3 sets of data: grade data, individual activity data, so am I studying, what am I studying, so on and so forth, as well as institutional data around the resources that they're accessing, running machine learning algorithms, and then creating profiles to predict student success, as well as tell individual and give them feedback about are they hitting the level of interventions necessary to be successful based on the goals that they actually set. So it's a goal-setting feature. Do you want to be A student, B student? And we're going to tell you exactly what it means to do that within the context of your university and your major. In addition, we would create this community building system and have competition, so allowing universities to create another level. Hey, the individual that uses the study center the most, we're going to give you a free ticket to the game. And it's giving you incentives to actually to do the things necessary to be successful. The unique approach that we're taking is very few platforms that have been able to really get significant amount of traction in this space. Part of the problem is getting people to use the application. We feel like we have some inherent benefits to being able to do that. For students, really it's said improved academic outcomes. For colleges, being able to measure the impact of specific interventions. And then for companies, understanding how can I create targeted opportunities for recruiting and putting out information to students. And really, one of the big competitive advantages we see is that learning analytics is a part of the University of Michigan strategy moving forward. So finally, just think about the scope of this potential impact. You got 20 million students, as another group said, enrolled in college in the United States. But if we can figure out how to increase retention by 1%, you're talking about $180 billion of increased lifetime earnings. That difference between what you earn as a high school student and a graduate and a college graduate. And we believe that that has a real economic impact on this country, especially when it comes to the growth and the education of our future workforce. So thank you. I'd like to take any questions you might have at this time.
Matthew, a lot of energy, really, I love it. And this is a great slide to end on because it's clear that kind of economic influx would be a big change. So thank you for thinking through that. The question I have is around the business model.
Sure.
You're trying to cover a lot of bases. I saw 2 different slides with constituents. One was the students, the professors, the institutions, and another one I'm forgetting. Mm-hmm. And then there was another slide with then, excuse me, it was the one with the ribbons or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm still not clear where the value exchange is happening to understand the business.
That's a great question. So one of the things I want to show you is an ExxonMobil student retention toolkit. Okay. Now this was a $2 million project that was funded by ExxonMobil that does benchmarks across the entire country. And it looks at what institutions that are doing that are successfully leading to student outcomes. So the corporate community is heavily ingrained in this problem. We, as the National Society of Black Engineers, have a $10 million operating budget. 80% of that comes from companies. When you look at the federal budget over the last 4 years, almost $6 billion has been spent on STEM education. So I don't think it's necessarily a resource problem, or to your point, what's the revenue model actually look like? Mm-hmm. Companies are coming to the table and asking us, we want to help in this problem, but we don't know what to do. So help us understand, what can we do? Where can we invest our money to make sure that the students that come out of the back end are well prepared for success?
I'll add a comment. I'm with you because as a hiring person, sometimes I feel like the graduates are coming out and they're actually not even ready. Mm-hmm. So just like you talked about not being ready to enter college from high school, the same thing's happening. They're exiting college and not always ready for the workforce.
And that's the beautiful thing about this model is it's really scalable. Once you develop your infrastructure, you can imagine doing the same thing about career preparation, entering the workforce, graduate school preparation, what it means to go into grad school, or even down, what does it mean to make that transition from middle school to high school? That's a big jump for some students, right? So putting the infrastructure in place, there's all types of adaptability available for it.
I really liked how you identified your problem statement very clearly. And also, the importance, we all know, and especially in higher education, that retention rate in colleges and universities is a huge, huge deal.
It's currency.
So, absolutely, absolutely. So I think that, that would be a great marketing approach, So, and then, and also you mentioned intrinsic motivation, and I think that, that in itself is, really kind of hitting to the core of, the students, what is really, what are they really struggling with, and how can we really motivate them? So I think you touched on those areas very well from the school's perspective and also the user's perspective with the students. So great job on that. So my question for you is, how do you plan to embed this system into the existing educational platform? Because there's, that might be a challenge. You mentioned one of the challenges is to get the student to actually use it. Now, how do you get the schools that have a very solidified system and set way of doing things to change it? So how do you plan to embed that?
That's a great question. So right now, I'm one of the program evaluators for the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. I'm working within the Center for Education, Design, Evaluation, and Research. And we have a collaboration of 4 institutions that are actually working with me to develop a longitudinal tracking system for students. What we're talking about here is game changing, and they haven't seen the full scope of this, but I have commitments from the executive director to actually fund some of this work already. So there will be some work done on this platform. The big question is what level of content and features can be integrated. Now, there's 2 ways I see it happening. Number one, institutions don't have a common platform like you might think for a lot of the specific interventions. So if I have a summer bridge program, that content is not being captured in one central repository. It's all over the place. So they can use this as a way to store and get that information feedback. The second part is most universities are really only using like one of 2 or 3 platforms. The most common is Blackboard, the second is Canvas. So creating those APIs that can pull that information, as long as the student opts in, allows us to leverage their current systems. We're not telling them buy a new system or totally replace it. It just gives you opportunity to pull more data from more sources to add to that machine learning algorithm.
Why are you doing this?
Because when I dropped out, I really didn't know what I was going to do in my life. And if it wasn't for the communities that I tapped into that could tell me, here's what office hours are, here's the professor you need to take, here's where you get your haircut on campus. I mean, I didn't have that community as a 27-year-old grown man coming back with these young Ferraris. I was that old Mustang that you gotta rev it up for a little bit to get up there, right? But imagine if the fastest growing population in higher education is non-traditional. So imagine now giving them the power to see this is exactly what it takes. That 41-year-old mom who's just gotten divorced and decided to go back to school to say, I can go online, I can look and I can figure out what it's going to take to be that. And I can make the decision before I even jump 2 feet in, is this the right thing for me? And once I get in there, I have a community of like-minded people that can support me and direct me to the resources. So this is not just something I do. This is a passion for me, and this is why I came to higher education and why I wanted to get my PhD.
I think it's really clear that you've done like a lot of research and like really understand the issue. But schools struggle with like the adoption rates of these kind of products because it's like a fundamental behavior change to have the students opt in and do this on a daily basis. And so I just want you to kind of articulate how you're getting over that.
So there's 2 approaches. One is through the internal communities that already exist, right? And so you start talking about tapping into those student organizations that can use this as a platform. But then the second place is when we start talking about this is a learning leverage competition. One of the levers that university has is providing incentives based on utilization. And it's no different than what the university does right now with their Hail app. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you get points every time that you go to an activity. You get your tickets on the app, right? And they give away stuff all the time. Well, the university, instead of focusing on athletics, can focus on academics and really provide scholarships that are not just merit-based, but they're tied to the activities that you're doing for specific interventions. For example, the MSTEM community has a contract that says you have to attend a certain level of workshops and things like that during the year, and it's tied to your funding. The university also has that lever to use. If you want this funding that's particularly designed for retention, then you have to participate in these activities. And we hope that that would increase the level of participation.
You should look up a company called Raise.me. They
Okay.
do something similar, but high school scholarships. Like you have to do certain activities in order to get access to different scholarships.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.